leadership. And I have the honor now of introducing our keynote for day 2 of our Powerful Connection 2021 LGBTQ Plus Business Summit, Representative Sam Park, who is the first openly gay man and the first Asian American Democrat elected to the Georgia State Legislature. He's a grandson of refugees from the Korean War and son of Korean immigrants. Sam is a native Georgian, born and raised by a single mother, and he became the first lawyer in his family and obtained his master's in law, politics, and legislation. In his personal capacity, Sam serves as General Counsel for Positive Impact Health Centers, the largest HIV/AIDS service organization in Georgia, working to end the HIV epidemic. And I want to welcome to the stage Sam Park. It is a pleasure to have you here today.
Well, thank you so much. Happy Pride, y'all. It is my honor and pleasure to be here with y'all this afternoon. Thank you, Chris, for the kind introduction and for your leadership. Thank you to the Out Georgia Business Alliance for all the good work y'all do for our community and for inviting me to be your keynote speaker for this fabulous summit. So as Chris said, my name is Sam Park. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I have the honor of being the first openly gay man and the first Asian American Democrat ever elected to the Georgia State Legislature. For me, Pride Month is an important time to celebrate the progress we've made as LGBTQ Americans to ensure our country lives up to its promise of providing each and every one of us an opportunity to live freely and pursue our happiness to the best of our ability. This month is also a time for reflection, recognizing the challenges our community continues to face at home and abroad, and the work we must continue to do to ensure the equal dignity of all of our LGBTQ plus family members. And so this afternoon, I hope I can share my thoughts with y'all about the progress we've made as may be reflected in my own story as a gay Asian American born and raised in Georgia, the challenges we face today, a few of which I've worked on in the Georgia State Legislature, and the challenges that lie ahead that also bring an opportunity for us to collectively determine our shared future. So let's begin. More than 50 years ago, on June 28th, 1969, the Stonewall Inn became the birthplace for equal dignity and freedom for millions of Americans and future generations. Thanks to a courageous few, including Marsha P. Anderson and Sylvia Rivera, 2 transgender women of color who stood up to discrimination and oppression, countless others were inspired to do the same. Because of their service and the sacrifice of countless others, we have made great strides and progress for LGBTQ plus Americans in the past 50 years, from protecting our right to privacy, recognizing our right to marry, and ensuring our freedom from discrimination, a fight we continue today. From the courts to the ballot box, we have fought for our rights and we have won. Although, of course, there have been setbacks along the way, we have continued to move forward. In looking back at our shared history, I find hope in seeing the long arc of history bend toward justice for our community, whereby one step at a time, and sometimes 2 steps forward and 1 step back, we have continued to make progress for LGBTQ plus Americans. And reflecting upon our history and our past, I'm also inspired and encouraged by the resilience, perseverance, and fearlessness of the LGBTQ plus leaders who, when faced with hatred, discrimination, violence, and at times hopeless situations, refused to give up or give in, and as a result made this nation, our country, a better place for all of us. As we celebrate the LGBTQ plus leaders who broke barriers and sacrificed so much of themselves, I believe it is equally important to recognize and celebrate our democracy, which enabled our community to make the progress we've made. While imperfect in its very nature, as evidenced by the systemic challenges that exist today, from systemic racism to state-sponsored violence committed against Black and brown bodies, American democracy, and the expansion of the franchise, the expansion of our right to vote, and the freedoms that flow has allowed our nation to address the injustices of the past that we have inherited and provided we, the people, the freedom to perfect our union and ensure our founding principles of liberty, equality, and justice for all Americans are properly reflected in the laws of our state and our country. Through the power of the vote, here in Georgia, we elected leaders like Kathy Willard, Alex Wan, Carla Drenner, Simone Bell, and Keisha Waits, who broke barriers and paved the way for the next generation of LGBTQ plus elected leaders, such as my good friends and colleagues, Park Cannon, Renita Shannon, Matthew Wilson, Marvin Lim, Senator Kim Jackson, Everton Blair, Ben Koo, Steffi Kuntz, Joseph Geierman, myself, and so many others. We stand on the shoulders of not only these LGBTQ plus history makers, we stand on the shoulders of all the Georgians who used the power of their vote to help change the course of history by electing LGBTQ plus Georgians and trusting us to serve not only their best interest, but to make progress for all who call Georgia home. And it is our responsibility to help pave the way for the next generation of leaders. So I am proud to stand before you today as an example of the progress that is possible here in Georgia and the United States of America, as evidence that the American dream is alive and well because of the power of the vote, the use of which strengthens our democracy. For we hold in our hands the power to bring about the change that is demanded and needed in our communities. As John Lewis eloquently said, the vote is the most powerful, nonviolent change agent we have in a democratic society, and we must use it. So to celebrate the progress we've made during Pride Month, let us honor those who've paved the way for all of us, and together do everything within our power and ability to protect and strengthen our democracy, which provides us the mechanism by which we may continue the march for justice and the fight for equal dignity and freedom for all Americans. The progress we've made in America for LGBTQ rights is not just historical, theoretical, or rhetorical. As a gay Asian American born and raised in Georgia, I've experienced and directly benefited from the progress we've made, like many of you. In 1998, when I was 13 years old, Matthew Shepard was tortured and murdered for being gay. That was a formative learning experience that taught me what could happen to me if someone found out that I was gay. Around that time, friends who were between the ages of 13 and 15 years old were kicked out of their homes after their parents found out that they were gay. Facing such rejection, hatred, and physical danger, I was terrified of being outed and burrowed as deeply into the closet as I possibly could to ensure that no one would find out my truth. By the age of 18, I could not deny who I was. I came to a crossroads. I had to decide whether I would live a lie for the rest of my life or simply accept the truth that I was gay. As I'm a terrible liar, I decided to simply live my truth. When I came out to my sisters, they were surprised, but they didn't care. I was still their little brother whom they loved. When my mother found out, it broke her heart and greatly damaged our relationship, which took years to heal. Though my mother passed away in 2018, without a doubt in my mind, I am comforted by the fact that I know my mother unconditionally loved me for who I am. As I was beginning to take steps to accept who I was and learning to love myself, which is an ongoing process for all of us in every season of life, the fear of rejection, the stigma of being outed remained and was reinforced when in 2004, when I was 22 years old, my home state of Georgia amended its constitution to explicitly prohibit same-sex marriage, which was approved by 76% of Georgia voters. Think about that for a second. A little more than just 15 years ago, nearly 2.5 million Georgians voted to amend our state's constitution to define marriage as between a man and a woman and deny the legitimacy of LGBTQ plus relationships. While the constitutional amendment was challenged in the courts on July 7th, 2006, the Georgia Supreme Court ultimately upheld the discriminatory amendment to our state's constitution. To say the least, during that season of life, the last thing I was thinking about was running for public office. It was something unfathomable to me, outside the realm of possibility. My focus was simply on making ends meet and doing what I could to take care of my family. Little did I know what was in store for me. Little did I understand or appreciate at the time the transformative power of the vote. And yet 10 years later, in 2016, I found myself on the ballot as a candidate for public office. So how in the world did that happen? Well, in December of 2014, my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She was given 4 to 6 months to live without treatment and about 2 years with palliative care. Earlier that year, the Georgia State Legislature blocked Medicaid expansion, denying access to healthcare for more than 500,000 Georgians who still do not have access to healthcare today. As I took my mom to her chemo appointments, I was reminded daily how access to healthcare is a matter of life or death. The big policy issue became suddenly personal to me, and it awoke in me a fire that still burns bright today. Inspired by my mother's battle against cancer, I decided that I would stand and fight to give hundreds of thousands of Georgians the same fighting chance my mom was blessed to receive through public health insurance, Medicaid and Medicare. So with a belly full of fire, I decided against all odds that I would challenge a 3-term chairman and do everything within my power to hold her accountable for her vote against expanding Medicaid in Georgia and her vote in support of religious liberty legislation that would have permitted state-sanctioned discrimination against the LGBTQ plus community. As you may recall, this discriminatory legislation passed by the Georgia State Legislature in 2016, just 5 years ago, was a backlash in response to the 2015 Obergefell Supreme Court decision that made same-sex marriage the law of the land. Never in my wildest dreams could I have imagined that I would be able to marry the person I loved in my home state of Georgia. Now that's theoretical, of course, as I'm still single, but important nonetheless. Thanks to the support of Georgia's business community, some of who are here with us today and sponsoring this fabulous event, and LGBTQ plus leaders and elected officials, Governor Deal ultimately vetoed this harmful discriminatory piece of legislation. And since then, during the past 5 years I've been in the legislature, Georgia has not passed a single anti-LGBTQ piece of legislation, even though every year anti-LGBTQ bills continue to be introduced. Again, since I was elected in 2016, it has been a thrill and a great honor to see an explosion of LGBTQ political representation in state and local government, as well as the judiciary. In 2018, in Gwinnett County, the second largest county in Georgia and the most diverse, the epicenter of political change here in Georgia, we elected Ben Koo, the first LGBTQ member to our county commission, who worked on passing a county-wide non-discrimination ordinance. And we elected Everton Blair Jr., the first LGBTQ member of the Gwinnett County School Board, who is the current chairman of the largest school system in Georgia. Along with seeing an unprecedented number of LGBTQ plus candidates rise up and run for office, just last year, we elected Senator Kim Jackson, the first LGBTQ member of the Georgia State Senate, and Representative Marvin Lim, who became the third openly gay man elected to the Georgia House, as well as the first Filipino-American ever elected to the Georgia General Assembly. And of course, I must give a special shout out to my friend and colleague, Matthew Wilson, who is running to be the first statewide LGBTQ plus elected official as our next insurance commissioner. Together, we have stopped discriminatory legislation from becoming law, and we continue the fight to protect the rights of the LGBTQ plus community in Georgia. By ensuring our community has a seat at the table and changing the perceptions and opinions of those around us, of our fellow colleagues, We worked to protect the rights of same-sex parents when we passed comprehensive legislation to reform Georgia's adoption laws a few years ago. We've introduced comprehensive civil rights legislation to protect the LGBTQ community from discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations. We have worked to pass legislation to ban conversion therapy, which has such a detrimental impact on LGBTQ plus youth. We passed, I think in 2019, hate crimes legislation that included additional penalties for those who would commit a crime against a member of our community because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. For the first time in our history, the Georgia State House of Representatives passed a resolution acknowledging that LGBTQ rights are human rights. And just a few months ago, earlier this year, we passed legislation out of both the House and the Georgia State Senate to decriminalize HIV and take an important step toward ending the epidemic amidst this pandemic that has claimed the lives of too many in our community. There is no doubt that by the power of our vote, we have made progress here in Georgia, which we should celebrate. However, we must recognize and acknowledge the work that remains to be done. We remain mired in an HIV/AIDS epidemic with 15 to 25,000 individuals living with HIV in Georgia who remain out of care. And the harsh reality remains that discrimination continues to pose a real and persistent problem for LGBTQ Americans across this country. According to the Human Rights Campaign, nearly 2/3 of LGBTQ Americans report having experienced discrimination in their everyday lives. Transgender women of color continue to face an epidemic of violence as hate crimes, discrimination, and violence against Asian Americans spiked and remain at an elevated level amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. The homelessness of LGBTQ plus youth and their disproportionately high rates of suicide will likely be exacerbated by the most recent targeting of trans youth for political gain that we've seen in state legislatures across this country. In fact, 2021, this year, is officially the worst year since 2015 for anti-LGBTQ plus laws across the country, where a total of 18 pieces of legislation have already been signed into law. States now have enacted more anti-LGBTQ laws this year than in the last 3 years combined. 8 additional anti-LGBTQ bills are on governors' desks for their signature or veto. Of the more than 250 anti-LGBTQ bills that have been introduced this year, 15 would prevent trans people from using the bathroom or locker room that corresponds with their gender identity. In total, these bills include anti-trans sports bans, using religion as justification to discriminate and refuse providing medical services, and permitting student groups at colleges and universities to discriminate against LGBTQ plus students. And let me be clear, again, these bills have also been introduced in the Georgia State Legislature, and they likely will continue to be introduced in our state legislature, the People's House. While we have been so far successful in defeating these initiatives in Georgia, we must remain vigilant, steadfast, and make certain that we do not take for granted the progress we've made. I believe that together, we have the power to end the HIV epidemic and end LGBTQ discrimination in our lifetimes. However, we must be clear-eyed in understanding the challenges we face. As Georgians and as Americans, we have an opportunity to be a beacon of hope to those around the world who face persecution and death for who they are and whom they love. If we want to be a leader for human rights, which are LGBTQ plus rights around the world, we must demonstrate our values here at home, not merely by words, but by our deeds, our actions. It is also my humble opinion that amidst the many challenges we face, the greatest we face today which threatens our ability to make progress, is the ongoing assault against American democracy, against our right to vote in state legislatures across the country, including here in Georgia. These un-American efforts to make it harder for citizens to vote and participate in our democracy work to silence our voices and undermine the will and power of we the people to address the collective problems and injustices we face. With the opportunity I've been given here today, I want to thank our friends and allies in the business community for standing up and speaking out against these un-American, anti-democratic efforts. And I want to strongly urge anyone who may be watching or listening to do everything within your power to protect our country and preserve our freedom as Americans to determine our collective, our shared future. Now, as LGBTQ plus Americans, I know we faced a lot of adversity in our lives. I want to encourage y'all not to lose hope or become cynical or bitter, but to find the silver lining and view the hardships we are confronted with as an opportunity to grow, to build perseverance, as well as the ability to overcome whatever hardships and challenges may lie ahead. With our unique experiences, we have an opportunity to be a source of good in the world. We can serve as a bridge throughout all communities, for as members of the LGBTQ plus community, we exist in every community. We can be the moral conscience in whatever space we may find ourselves that rejects discrimination of any kind that leads to fear, hatred, and violence. By fearlessly being our authentic selves, we have the opportunity to demonstrate to the world that for us, it is the content of our character that truly matters, not the color of our skin, our national origin, or the person we love. This is true of everyone here today, regardless of whether you are gay or straight. We all have our own story to tell. All of us have the capacity to overcome the challenges we face, the power to do good, the power to transform the pain and anger that you may feel into purpose and action, and to ultimately make a difference in our communities. The story of LGBTQ plus progress over the past 50 years, for me, is one of hope that demonstrates the ability of we the people to make progress when we use the power we have and work together to live up to our founding principles of ensuring equal dignity, freedom, and justice for all of us. So never give up, and may we never stop fighting for what's right. Knowing that we have the power to be the difference and have the opportunity to bring about the change we need, it is my hope that we will be fearless in the face of uncertainty in the coming years. Let us not grow weary of doing good and use what power we have. So vote, vote, vote. And lastly, it is my hope that we will stand united with a commitment to drive out hate with love and together make all of our communities and the world a better place. Thank you for allowing me to be your keynote speaker this afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story and my thoughts with y'all. I hope y'all enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of this conference, and I will turn it back over to you, Chris. Thanks again so much.